Podcast. You ready? Which one? Let's start one.
Hello, good morning. My name's Megan. Thank you for joining us today. We just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to get on before we started. And so we can see we've got a few people coming through now, which is great. I hope you haven't been too impacted today by the cold weather. Please can you let me know that you can hear us okay if you just put a comment in.
To the chat section.
Into the chat section. So as I say, we've got Bryony who's going to be talking to us today about the latest when it comes to funding and policy.
Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an attendee.
And then I'll be going through what the City and Guild support looks like. So you've got everything that you need. So we will be answering questions at the end, but please do ask questions throughout via the chat box. And we are just checking that you can all hear us okay. We are recording this webinar as well, so you'll be able to access it and share it with your team members too. If everything's okay, then we'll crack on. Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hang on, I'm just trying to get the... there we go. Right, so the agenda today is we're going to look at the evolving AEB landscape and also what's happening with devolution and the Mayoral Combined Authorities. I'm going to shorten that down to MTA because Mayoral Combined Authorities is a real mouthful and it's still quite early in the morning. I'm not sure I'll get it out perfectly every single time. So MCA is for Mayoral Combined Authority. Then we'll look at some of the AEB changes and opportunities both that are happening in year, some of the pros and cons of some of the changes that are occurring, what support City and Guilds can give you, and then Megan's going to talk about the hints and tips to grow your revenue, and then we'll have a question section. We've also included on the slides towards the end some useful information, particularly the last slide, which has a list of all the Mayoral Combined Authority website links, which take you straight to the pages where the MCAs are running their procurement exercises, whether they've closed them or whether they're currently ongoing or whether they're about to start. So those links on the final slide might be useful to those of you that are thinking about potentially bidding for or responding to the calls for proposals from all of the MCAs that are out to procurement at the moment. So without further ado, let's move on. So the evolving landscape. As we know, the adult education budget at the moment is approximately 1.52 billion per annum. The amount of that that's going to be devolved from the 1st of August this year is 750 million. Approximately 300 million of that is going to London, so inevitably they've got quite a large chunk of it, being one of the biggest areas. The other devolving areas that you can see there will have their allocations based on the previous year's adult education budget used by the providers that are in their area. That is based on the postcode of the learners, and I'll talk more about that in the later slide because there are some very interesting boundary issues which are occurring as part of the devolution of the adult education budget, which I'm sure that some of you may well have come up against already. So that's a list of the devolving MCAs that are all going live on the 1st of August this year, apart from the bottom two, the Sheffield City region and North of Tyne. Those two areas are due to devolve 1 year later on the 1st of August 2020. That's if both the regions are ready, because any region that is devolving and receiving adult education budget has to be assessed by the ESFA as being ready to do so, i.e. they've got all the legal and procurement framework in place to enable them to move forward and manage their adult education budget effectively. Other AEB points of interest which are occurring this year are the adult education budget flex for low wage and ESOL learners. Now that's a new ruling which basically states that if a learner is earning less than £15,736.50, it's a very precise figure, and this accounts for ESOL learners as well, and they're up to the age of 24, but they're earning that amount or less, providers can now deliver courses to those learners free of charge, whereas before they would had to have, in most cases, contribute at least 50% of the cost of the course. There are some interesting issues with that, some around ESOL learners. We've had some providers telling us that ESOL learners, previously they used to get full cost, and they were actually earning more from full cost ESOL learners than they get from the funding. But I think the one thing to think about with a lot of ESOL learners is those ESOL learners that are in very low-waged jobs, and a lot of people who can't speak particularly good English end up in low-wage jobs, would have been unlikely to be able to contribute to the cost of their course. So although many providers were getting full cost or full fees for ESOL learners directly from the learner, there is a large cohort of ESOL learners out there that it may not even have reached yet, because they are the ones that would not have been able to contribute, but they're also the ones that really need that ESOL learning to improve their language skills and their English skills so they can move on and get better jobs and hopefully have better careers. The other, the other issue the other point that the ESFA raised this year is that they've added in a 3% tolerance for over-delivery on the adult education budget for 2018-19. Now that means that they will pay at the end of the year for any over-delivery providers do on their AEB up to 3%. We've already got some providers that are reaching that particular point. And we're hoping for growth, but from what we're hearing, there isn't going to be any growth on the adult education budget above that over-delivery during the performance points. So we're not expecting any further announcements from the ESFA, but who knows? But what the ESFA have said is that you can go up to over 3% over your current contract value. Anything you do over and above that is at your own risk. The ESFA do not promise to pay it. And then again, the final thing that's coming in for post-18 funding and the landscape is the post-18 review of education and funding, which is being carried out by Paul Auger. It was due to be published around about now. It's been put back to sometime in February, mainly because of a change that happened with another review by the Office of National Statistics before Christmas, who decided to make student debt or put student debt on the government's books, which meant immediately that the Treasury lost some money out of their national budget. So they've asked Paul Auger to take that into consideration as part of the review. So that's why it's been put back, and we're expecting that to be published sometime during February. It's going to be very interesting to see what he says. Everyone does think that that review of education and funding is mainly about HE, but it does also include FE. So we may well see some changes about how post-18 FE funding is funded going forward and how it's delivered. So that one will be interesting to watch. As soon as it comes out, we will do another webinar on that to let you know what we think some of the outcome of that will be and what the changes might be. So which are the devolving areas? The devolving areas are up there on the left in the grid. Now, where I've put ITT, what that basically means is, or what that's showing is, ITT stands for invitation to tender. Some people call it procurement, some people call it commissioning, but an invitation to tender is basically a publication by an individual authority asking, in this case, providers to respond to their commissioning process for allocating adult education budget funds. Every single region is doing this slightly differently. For example, some areas like London have offered part of the adult education budget to grant funding providers, so they don't actually have to bid for those funds. So mainly the part of the adult education budget for GLA, Greater London Authority, has been given out as grants to mainly colleges and local authorities, which has left the independent training providers to bid. Now, that didn't mean that colleges couldn't bid for more adult education budget as part of that commissioning process, but they were also given a grant. The top three, as you can see, their commissioning rounds have now closed, and they are in situation of scoring those bids and looking at allocations. West Midlands Combined Authority have issued a prior prior information notice telling everybody that they're about to, and asking for information as part of that PIN. Tees Valley, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and West of England are all out now, and the final slide in this deck of slides has got the links to those pages, so you'll be able to see exactly where each combined authority is with its commissioning process for its adult education budget. And the final link there that you can see at the bottom is the ESFA or .gov information about understanding the implications of AEB devolution from the 1st of August this year, although hopefully what we'll cover today will give you a pretty good idea of what's going on. So points to consider as part of devolution, and there are some very interesting things to think about with devolution. Mayoral Combined Authorities or Combined Authorities, MTAs, will only fund learners within the border of their Combined Authority area or locality, but the ESFA will not fund learners with an MTA postcode. So if you are a provider on the border of an MTA, but you potentially draw learners from that MTA area, unless you have an AEB grant or allocation from that MTA, you will not be able to fund those learners because the ESFA will not fund them. So this has made some very interesting situations with batches of providers that are on the outskirts, around the edges and the borders of MTA areas, some of whom I think were aware that they had to potentially bid in, some of whom weren't. I was at an event on Monday where several providers flagged that not only had they lost quite a lot of their funding, their AEB funding for next year, because a lot of their learners were coming from the postal area of the MTA, so that their adult education budget had shrunk and that money had been given to the MTA, but they were not aware that they were able to bid for MTA grant funds or AEB allocation as part of the commissioning process. So they have potentially missed out and lost quite a lot of their adult education budget. So if you're a border provider that does draw learners from an MCA area, if you haven't bid, you can find yourself in a rather difficult situation. At the event I was at on Monday, one of the leads at the event who was debating this has said that they will take that back to the DFE and ESFA to have some further discussions. But so far, I think DFE and ESFA position on this is they think it's a small number of learners and it won't cause too many problems. I have to say that was not the impression that I got on Monday from the various providers that were there. I think this could be a bit of a small bomb waiting to happen once it's all in place. We find some learners who, for instance, might commute into an MTA area. If you take the larger urban areas, such as Manchester and London, where people might be commuting into those areas from outside and want to access adult education budget courses or programs either at lunchtime or in the evenings, or actually they're a learner that lives outside of the MTA area, but they want to commute into the MTA because the course and program they want to access is only run within the MTA area. Those learners will be left out in the cold unless they can find another provider in the area that runs their course and program. If they can't, they won't be able to access it because of their postcode. So I can see all sorts of strange situations here with people giving postcodes of friends that live in the city, their aunt or their dentist or someone like that, and using the postcode of not of their actual home address to access provision because they can't access it because of the current postcode. So that one's going to be an interesting one to watch. Years 1 and 2. So initially, the ESFA has agreed with the MTAs not to destabilise the landscape in year 1 of devolution. So that means that MTAs will not make too many changes to grants and allocations for AEB in the first year, or make too many changes to what sort of provision is currently going forward. But they have agreed to work with providers during the course of the year to change provisions and allocations in year 2. So that means that in year 2, allocations may change. The outcome-based agreements that MCAs are all working towards may require providers to deliver courses and programs that they're either not set up to deliver or may not have the skills and experience to deliver with staff. So you've got a year to work through that with your local MCA area to make sure that you are ready in year 2 to meet the changes, which means that the MCAs can then meet their local priorities, their skills priorities that are laid out in all of their skills strategies or their economic plans. So although there's not going to be too much change in the next year, there will be some change, but the next year is very important. If you are in an MTA area or on the border, you really do need to be talking to your MTA to make sure that you're up to date and up to speed with what they want to deliver in year 2 and what the changes may be, to make sure you're ready, both in terms of the skills and experience of your staff, but also in terms of your curriculum to deliver what your MTA wants with their adult education budget. And finally, MTA funds. Individual MTAs will have their own funding rules, their own rates and their own formula, which will be, in some cases, different from the ESFA. There is also notes in some of the information that's both online and at some of the events that we've gone to personally with MCAs, stating that they are all heading towards having a separate ILR return or separate data return from the ESFA. So this makes for some interesting administrative burdens for providers, because if you are on the border and you've got both an MTA contract and also an ESFA contract, you will potentially be working to 2 different sets of funding rules, rates and formula, and you may also, by year 2, be required to make 2 separate data returns. I know that all the MTAs are working with the ESFA to make this as painless as possible, but doing 2 data returns and having separate funding rules and rates is still going to end up with some extra administrative burden. And looking at what AEB budget you have and how you're running it, is probably going to be a part of your requirement to make sure that actually it's worth your while to do this. And for national providers that are delivering nationally, if they are thinking of delivering across all the MTA areas or selection of MTA areas, you could find that you will have several different sets of individual funding rules, rates and formula, and may have to make, well, probably will have to make a separate ILR return for all the areas you are delivering AEB MTA funds in. So that one's going to be very interesting to watch from the point of view of the level of bureaucracy and the administrative burden that everyone's going to have to take on as part of this. And however much ESFA and MTAs may say that they're working together to make it as painless as possible, I think that's going to be a difficult one to actually live up to. MTAs will also, in most cases, be paying on outcomes, i.e. the progression of the learner into employment or further learning, or the number of qualifications delivered in a certain sector subject area. Those are going to be the types of contracts that MCAs are going to work on to deliver with their providers that they've given AEB adult education budget to. So those contracts or funding agreements will be very different to the ones that you currently have with the ESFA. So that's another extra bit of tracking and progression that you're going to have to put in place over the course of next year to make sure that you're meeting the MCA funding agreement requirements, as well as any ESFA funding agreement requirements that you may have, because they are going to be different. So those are all some points to be aware of when you're thinking about devolution or potentially thinking about working in MCA areas, or whether you're based on a border. So adult education budget. Just a quick look at the AEB opportunities for 2018-19. Just a reminder, really, because I think there's been so much concentration in the last couple of years on the apprenticeship reforms that AEB has sort of got, I think, pushed to the back of the queue a little bit in terms of what it does and how useful it is as a funding stream. And we know that there's been a lot of underspend with AEB over the course of the last couple of years, partially, I think, because providers have struggled with some of the eligibility rules. There's been the introduction of universal credit, which has had, I think, in some areas quite a profound effect on the number of learners that get referred by the job centre. And there's also been the concentration on apprenticeships, which has taken a lot of time and resource away from providers to get that in place. But AEB, the adult education budget, really does underpin everything. It underpins both employer needs in terms of anything that's level 2 and below. It meets some of the national economic needs and the social mobility needs of the industrial strategy for the government in terms of getting people who are unemployed or in low-paid employment into better jobs and with better careers. It can deal with some of the retraining issues that are going to occur because of Brexit, redundancies, the fourth industrial revolution, what's going to happen with technology when some of the more manual roles are going to disappear, and a lot of people are going to need some sort of retraining, but they may be low skilled because they've been in a manual role, so stepping into an apprenticeship isn't always going to be the right option for them or the feasible option for them. So adult education budget can also be used to run pre-apprenticeship courses to get people ready for apprenticeships. And also it's used as ESF matching, although obviously with Brexit and what's happening with potential no deal and crashing out of the European Union, we'll wait to see what happens with European Social Fund and the matching. And also it can lead to really good job outcomes for and job and career improvements for learners who are on the lower skill end of things. So it really does underpin everything else that's happening in the market with apprenticeships and some of the higher levels. And it's a funding stream that we need to make sure we're making really good use of, particularly at the moment when the government is looking very carefully at the funding that they're giving to skills. We need to make sure that we're using it effectively and it's making a difference, because then hopefully it will mean that we can keep on relying on it to be there in some shape or form. So the 19 plus funding eligibility, I'm sure that all of you that are providers know this pretty well, so I'm not going to go through in minute detail. We know there's a level 2 and level 3 entitlement, and City and Guilds have got 190 qualifications in that legal entitlement offer that can be offered to any learner who's taking their first full level 2 or level 3 up to the age of 24. And then there's the local flexibility, which is that part of the adult education budget, which is designed to support adults with lower level skills, those who are unemployed, those who are in low-skilled employment, either improving their employment opportunities and chances or entering the labour market for the first time. And we've got a really large number of qualifications, over 850 available in our local offer. So there's a lot of choice for providers there to use with those particular learners. So the low-wage rule changes for this year, which is a real opportunity for providers to make use of that adult education budget. As I said earlier, any learner earning less than £15,736.50, that is a one-year pilot. We've got no news at all yet from the ESFA or from the Minister about whether they're considering continuing that into 2019-2020 academic year. So making use of it now as much as you possibly can to spend your adult education budget is really important. As I said earlier, it includes ESOL target group, and that in-year over-delivery of up to 3%. There are lots of options to market your offer. I've put just a few ideas up there that might help you market the low-wage offer to different learners and different employers. And as you can see there, the new flexibility offers lots of opportunity to help employers achieve business transformation. And also there's something in the Ofsted Common Inspection Framework at the moment about meeting local priorities for devolution and Ofsted. And Ofsted currently look at the extent to which leaders and managers in colleges and providers collaborate with employers and partners to ensure that the range and content of your provision and your curriculum is aligned to the local and regional priorities. And the adult education budget can really help you do that. So using it to do that to improve your Ofsted outcome chances is also a really good opportunity. Just out of interest, we've looked at some supporting data. So we looked at some of the analysis from both Ofqual and from the Office of National Statistics of low-wage employment sectors. And you can see here those areas where there are likely to be low-waged employment, and therefore potential opportunity for learners in those sectors. If you've got any employers who employ staff in these areas, so hospitality and catering is one, retail is another, social care is another, foundations for learning and life, that's all the level 2 and below stuff, so the employability side of things, which we already know. There's also sport and leisure and recreation. Those are other areas. And ICT is another one which can be low skilled, and building and construction as well. So there are all areas there for you to look at the employers in your surrounding area and see if you think any of them might be an opportunity for you to spend your adult education budget or use your adult education budget to support those learners or those employees and those employers to increase and improve skills. And that's just the learner eligibility rules from the ESFA. The City and Guilds, we have an adult education budget website, and the link in pink at the top when you get these slides takes you straight to that AEB page on our website. We've also got funding updates which are occurring regularly now that I write every time any news is announced or there's any publication of new policy. I'll be running regular funding updates which will go up on our website. If you want to sign up for them, if you go onto any City and Guilds website page and scroll down at the bottom, you'll see a small link which says email updates. If you click on that, it takes you to our preference centre and takes you through a very short process to sign up for those updates. As long as you click on funding updates, when you reach that part of the sign-up process, every time I send out an alert for one of those funding updates going up on the website, you will get a short email saying a funding alert is now on, and a link to lead you straight to that funding update so you can access it and see what's happening. And I'll be running them regularly throughout the year on an ongoing basis to keep you all up to speed, not just with adult education budget, but with potentially apprenticeship news and T-level news and anything else that's happening. Next big thing will obviously be that post-18 review that Paul Auger is due to publish sometime, hopefully in February. I'm going to pass you over to Megan, who's going to talk to you from a business manager standpoint about what City and Guilds can do to support you with use of your AEB and devolution.
Brilliant, thank you, Bryony. So just to recap really, so my role as the Regional Business Manager for the South, but taking a lead in adult education budget, is to make sure that our team, your business managers, are fully up to date and upskilled and being able to support you and make sure you're getting the most out of your adult education budget. So listening to everything that Bryony's just talked to you about, we're just summarising here, okay, the current pros and cons from what we're hearing. So it's just summarising what you need to be mindful of with all the change that's happening. So it's about localised decision making. So you will have an opportunity to influence what's funded, what's needed. If you can prove the demand is there and employers are shouting out for this programme, this qualification, then you will have more opportunity to influence that. It will open up the doors to new tendering opportunities. So if you are a new provider in these devolved areas and you've wanted to get involved with that education budget through the tendering route, you have got new opportunities coming up, and also there's a reduction of subcontracting going on. So you're more likely to be able to access your own direct contracts. It's also going to be very outcome-based, so it's an absolute better deal for learners and employers, and making sure we're doing right by our learners and getting them into their future jobs and onto their next jobs. Also, the funding remains within the community, so it's not going out across a national picture. It's not about kind of meeting the masses. It's making sure the funding's going into the community where it's allocated. And then the low wage rule, as Bryony said, you'll be able to access more learners through that, but turning that then into a con and something to be mindful of, it can have an impact, especially if you look at ESOL as an example, where before, because learners weren't eligible, you would have charged full cost to them, and so your profit margins might have been a bit higher on that. So you do need to be a bit more mindful of, okay, you might be attracting learners, but actually is that detracting away from what you would have traditionally offered as full cost? There will be fewer awarded contracts as well. So we are seeing in some areas where they're looking at cutting providers from about 170 providers to 40. So you do need to be mindful of that, and it's going to come down to all of your networking. Do these Mayoral Combined Authorities know about you, know who you are, and are you shouting out about your amazing offer? And also, there are going to be the cross-boundary issues, so we will absolutely support you as we get more information around that. And as Bryony's mentioned as well, it's the admin burden, because you're going to be dealing with potentially 8-9 contracts at a time and multiple systems. So just being very mindful of these things. But we have got a commitment that the first year won't be impacted. But as we know, time flies, so that year will be over before we know it. Okay, so moving on now to how can we at City and Guilds, through our City and Guilds brand and our ILM brand, support you. So we will be sending out packs to customers who are interested, and also have available on our website an adult education budget checklist. So this is just a recap of, have you done everything that you need? So have you pulled your data of who your learners are and what their postcode codes are, and where do they sit around the country, and are they in a devolved area? So you can really assess what is at risk because of the devolution, or what is going to still be managed through your ESFA direct contract. Also, it's around your employer engagement. It's about, have you read your local skills strategy? Have you actually dedicated time to curriculum planning? So this is looking at it's not just about the qualifications that you've delivered year after year after year. We need to think differently now. We need to really make sure we're catering to the needs of your community and your employers to make sure those learners come out with a max outcome. Have you got connections to jobs after they've completed their programme? And it's also mapping in the time, when in the year is this happening, because traditionally it's been very roll on, roll off, but it's going to be a lot more managed now. Also, just in terms of an operational aspect, have you got all of your approvals in? So when you're looking at our kind of suite of over 1,500 qualifications and they fit the bill, making sure you've got all of your approvals and everything ready, because we know we're coming into the period now where adult education budget delivery really ramps up. So we have been, Bryony and I, meeting with Mayoral Combined Authorities around the country, and this is for two reasons. Firstly, to make sure we are advising you on the latest strategy and what's happening, but also we can inform our own strategy and need to make sure we're bringing the right products to market for you. It's also so we can be a provider voice and really inform the MTAs of any impacts of changes that they might be considering. If they are looking at reducing any funding bands, changing any hours, any eligibility, it's making sure they can really think through what the potential impacts are for you as providers delivering out there. So again, use your business managers, come through to us to feed back to us anything, any concerns, any positives, anything you want to stress, because we are making sure we're being that voice back in. We've got our adult education budget catalogue, so you will get the link to this on the slides, and you can see a screen grab here. So because we do have so many qualifications, we want to make sure that we're easy to do business with and you can access this simply. So we've got a catalogue on our webpage, and what you'll be able to do is select a sheet relevant to the sector that you want to focus on. So when you've gone through your skills strategy, and you can see, for example, there's a big focus on English and maths, construction and digital, you can go straight to those sheets that are relevant to those areas, and you can see what the funding drawdown is and the funding rate to make sure you're fully utilising your allocation. So it's all about training webinars like today, so we will absolutely continue to do these throughout the year to make sure we're giving you the latest information. But also, we appreciate you don't always have 45 minutes to sit down and listen to us. So Bryony, with our superb social media guy Paul, is going to be launching video logs throughout the year as well. These will be short, sharp, 5-minute video updates, and we'll be posting them on our social media channels. So please make sure you are following City and Guilds, ILM, Bryony, myself, and your business managers to make sure you've got the latest there. So we have revamped our adult education budget webpage as well to make it easier and more digestible, because there is a lot of information out there. So you'll get the short, sharp information that you need to know about, all of the access to our tools, and also Bryony will be doing with our marketing team news flashes on there as well, so you can click into what's the latest information that you need to know about. And expert advice. So we're really fortunate to have Bryony, who is very up to date with everything when it comes to funding and policy, but we've also got Claire Fraser, who works in our policy team, and she's out there lobbying and influencing and making sure the voice of our customers are heard as well, and that all feeds into everything that we do. You've got myself leading on this from a strategy to make sure your business managers are there to support you, can advise you on your curriculum planning. We've also got our technical advisors, so once you have got to a place of you know exactly what we want to deliver, it's then on to the onboarding of, okay, how do I deliver this? So make sure you're utilising us, basically. So we did do a webinar in March last year around just advice, basically, for growing your funding revenue. So I'm only going to touch upon this area because this is a bit of a copy from that, but it still plays an important part today. So it's just making sure you're maximising all opportunities. So when it comes to attracting learners and your learner fund and find, make sure you are positioning adult education budget with every employer conversation. You're not just going in to talk about apprenticeships, you're not just going in to talk about the levy, and you're fully understanding what that employer needs are and what the funding streams can apply to their employees. So is it apprenticeships, is it learner loans, is it adult education budget, is it full cost? Make sure you're maximising that. Make sure you're using the tools that we provide you. So take the catalogues out of you, so you can, you're not saying actually we currently don't offer that or we currently don't deliver it. It's actually potentially we can, and here's the types of qualifications that we can do there. In terms of expanding curriculum, as I say, we can't just stick with what we've done for the last few years. We really need to make sure we're expanding now, be it digital construction. If it's new for you, then you've got support from us to help you and how you can start to offer that. But do make sure you're reading your skill strategies and you're aware there of what's going on. We really appreciate there's lots of plates to spin at the moment. So whether you're looking at standards, T-levels, or there's mergers going on, so utilise your business manager who can come in and support you across your group. If you appoint a lead within your organisation, and what we can do is pull together what you offer across the group, and how do we streamline that and make sure as a group you are working to the maximum of your allocations as well. And then in terms of competition, it's just, again, get out there, networking. Are you at the same events your employees are at? Present the facts, to talk about your Ofsted, your timely completions, especially if you are fishing at the same pool of learners. You know, how digital savvy are you? Use our digital credentials within your programs to kind of stand you out there outside of the competition. And I've already touched upon the in-store engagement access information as well, but just make sure you're looking at their recent audits, do your research, what do you know about them, think about their future skills, what are they going through, they're making redundancies, can you offer your services as part of their package? So that's everything. Are there any questions? We'll just expand the box.
Can you forward me the webinar? Yes. Yes, everybody. The webinar, we're recording it, will be up on our website, and we will send out an email to everybody that's attended today to show you where it is and everybody that's signed up. I'm not sure whether it's going to go up on the AEB webpage. It probably will. I'll check that with marketing after, but yes, but the full slide deck and the recording of the webinar will be available. I think that's actually the only questions we've got, I think. Let's just have a quick look.
If you've got any more questions, please type them in the comments box. We're going to be sending you, so we've got a couple of slides with our contact details on, and also the link that Bryony spoke about with the MCAs.
So I'll just close that. Oh, gone back a bit. Sorry, everybody. Wait a minute. So that's our contact and support details for myself and Megan that you will see on the final page. And the very final page is a link to all of the MTA adult education budget pages on their sites. This is where you can find out what they're doing with their adult education budget and what they also may be doing with their commissioning or allocations of their adult education budget, how they're going about it. So those are direct links onto those pages. You just need to click on them. I think that's it for today. I can't see any more questions popping up from anybody. Hang on a moment. Let's just double check finally. Nope, that's great. Great. No questions. Thank you, everybody. We hope that was helpful. Keep an eye on our social media sites, because we will be putting up vlogs and new information as it comes about. And we hope that was useful. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.